In today's video, we are going to talk about how to choose your first Linux distribution. Myself Mohammad Zubair, and this channel is all about showing you how to become a highly paid IT pro really fast. So without any further ado, let's get started. Well, when it comes to choosing a Linux distribution, it is not as easy as choosing a Windows operating system or Mac. Because in Linux distribution, we have so much distributions that offer different kind of applications, different features, and most of them are specialized in some kind of work. For example, we have some Linux distributions that you can consider good for almost every work, like we have Ubuntu that you can use for your programming, for your general use, you can play games in it, and you can do a lot of other things. Then we have some Linux distributions that are specialized for gaming. For example, we have Gruda Linux, Draugr OS, Pop OS, Fedora, GameSpins, etc. These Linux distributions come with the default support for gaming. On the other hand, we have some Linux distribution that network engineer, ethical hackers, and penetration tester uses. For example, Kali Linux, Parrot OS are among those Linux distributions. So when we have so much Linux distribution, how to choose a one when we do not have any idea and we do not know how Linux works? So I'll talk about some of those factors that you should consider before choosing a particular Linux distribution. First of all, the factor that you should consider should be the interface of your installer, because there are some Linux distributions that do not offer GUI based installer and you have to install your Linux distribution through your commands. But as you can see, this is the installer of Pop OS and everything is written clearly and you just have to follow the instructions on the screen. I will just double click on my English and now I will just click on United States in terms of my language, and then here just double click on default and we are good to go. So this is how you can install your Pop OS very easily into your virtual machines, VirtualBox, or directly onto your machines, because every instructions and all the things that are necessary to install a particular Linux distributions are given on the screen and we just have to follow the instructions. So this is one of the factors that you should consider before choosing a particular Linux distribution, because as you are a beginner, so you will not have an idea that how to install a particular Linux distribution using different commands. The next thing that should be considered is desktop environment. Well, desktop environment is like how you are going to get everything in your Linux distribution and how that Linux distribution is going to present you things. For example, all the applications, features, and different packages. I'm using at the moment Ubuntu 22.04 LTS, and Ubuntu uses GNOME desktop environment by default. Just like GNOME desktop environment, we have some other desktop environments as well. For example, we have KDE, we have XFCE, we have Cinnamon, Pantheon, and many more desktop environments. So it should be considered that with which one you want to go, because there are some desktop environments that are very easy to understand and very easy to use. As you can see, Ubuntu uses the GNOME desktop environment and it is very simple. Here we have some of the applications that are docked by default onto the left side of our window. Here we have our browser, then we have our mail client, here we have our file explorer just like in Windows, and then as we have Microsoft Store in Windows, we have Ubuntu Software Center. From here you can download and install different applications. So this is how GNOME has arranged everything for us. In other desktop environment, things will be arranged in different way. And GNOME allows you to tweak your desktop environment at some point. For example, if I right click on my screen and if I click on change background, so from here I can have different backgrounds and here I have different other settings that I can perform. Then we have KDE and XFCE. Those two desktop environments has to offer different customization in terms of tweaking your Linux distribution. And in GNOME, you will get the concept of activities and applications. For example, if I just click on activities, it will open these small windows. And in here, you will have all those applications that are opened at the moment. And then let's talk about the default application. because default application should be considered next after you are done selecting your desktop environment. So if I just click on my show applications button, here I have different applications that come by default into my Linux distribution. So this should be your consideration while choosing a particular Linux distribution, because as we know in Windows we get some of the default application. For example, we get music player, we have image viewer, we get paint, and we get Microsoft Edge browser. But in Linux, in most of the Linux distribution, you will get Mozilla Firefox as a default web browser and Thunderbird Mail as a default mail client. Then for documents, we get LibreOffice, which is an open source and free document manager. Then you have some of the other applications that you can use. So this is one of the other considerations that you should make along with having your desktop environment. Now I'll talk about more about desktop environment, because there are two types of Linux distribution that comes with each desktop environment. For example, if I talk about GNOME, well, in terms of stability, you can go for Zorin OS, you can go for Ubuntu, Fedora, and other Linux distribution. But if you want to go for bleeding edge, Manjaro is the one that you can go with. And if you want somewhere between stability and bleeding edge, Pop OS is the one for you. Well, you might be wondering, what do we mean by stability and bleeding edge? Well, by stability, we mean that the Linux distribution will be supported for next 5 years. As I am using Ubuntu 22.04, this Linux distribution will be supported for the next 5 years. But when we talk about the bleeding edge, well, in bleeding edge Linux distribution, we do not get newer version, we get updates. So we do not have to download the latest version in order to have everything latest. We just need to keep updating our system, and all the updates and all the latest things will be there for us in our Linux distribution that we have already installed. In case if you want to go for KDE Plasma, then in terms of stability, you can go for KDE Neon. And in case if you want to look for something that is bleeding edge, you can go for Manjaro KDE. Same goes for Cinnamon. Well, in terms of Cinnamon desktop environment, you can go for Linux Mint in terms of stability. And in case if you are looking for bleeding edge Linux distribution, then Manjaro Cinnamon is for you. And if I talk about the XFCE, well, in terms of stability, Zorin OS Lite, Ubuntu, which is a version of Ubuntu, will be a good choice for you. But in case if you want a bleeding edge Linux distribution with XFCE desktop environment, then Manjaro XFCE will be the one for you. So these are some consideration that you can make in terms of having different desktop environments for your Linux distribution. And there is one more good thing about desktop environment. For example, as I am using Ubuntu with desktop environment as GNOME, let's say I want to change my desktop environment. For that purpose, I have other flavors of Ubuntu available. For example, I have Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Xubuntu. Well, Xubuntu comes with XFCE desktop environment, Kubuntu comes with KDE desktop environment, and same goes for Lubuntu. And if I talk about Linux Mint, in Linux Mint we also get more than one desktop environment. For example, we get Cinnamon, XFCE, just like that. So in case if you are not liking the current desktop environment, you can always download different desktop environment for the same Linux distribution. We do not get this type of freedom with Windows or Mac operating system. So that was all about the default application and desktop environments. The next consideration that you should make while choosing a particular Linux distribution should be the use of hardware resources. Because if a Linux distribution is using a lot of hardware resources, then you should consider something else. And we have a lot of Linux distributions that supports older hardware as well. For example, let's say you have an older machine with limited hardware resources. There are 100% chances that you will find a particular Linux distribution that will support your older hardware as well. Now I will open my terminal, and in my terminal I'll use a utility that will show me that how much resources my Ubuntu is using at the moment. So for that purpose, I will just write here top and I will just hit enter. So here you can see at the moment my Ubuntu is using 1070 megabyte of my RAM. And then down here I have all the processes that are running at the moment and the resources that are being used by each process at the moment. So if I say that Ubuntu is not using a lot of hardware resources, it wouldn't be wrong. But there are also some other Linux distributions that use less hardware resources than this as well. So this should be your consideration while choosing a particular Linux distribution, that how much resources it's gonna need to work and run in your hardware. Let me open my browser, and in my browser I will open the community support forums for my Ubuntu. Ubuntu offers two forums. First one is Ask Ubuntu and the next one is Ubuntu forums. So I will just write here Ubuntu forums. Well, these two are community for Ubuntu. Well, in case if you get into any problem regarding your Linux distribution, you can use those communities for your help. For example, here if you see, people have posted different problems and their questions, and other users have answered their queries. For example, if you see here, this question have been answered by one person and this question had got 5 votes. And then 3000 people have viewed this question. So how cool and how easy it is that you just need to post your question in here and people will be there to answer your question. If I scroll down, you will see a lot of other questions have been posted and a lot of questions have been answered by other Ubuntu users. This is the Ask Ubuntu. Now I'll talk about the Ubuntu forums. While in here, you will get all the security updates, all the news and all the latest information that will be coming related to your Ubuntu. And you will also see the security solutions, the security patches and updates here as well. So as you can see, we have a lot of things in here. We have quick links, forum community where people will be there. Then you have Ubuntu community, other support, social media and useful links. So this should be your consideration while choosing a particular Linux distribution, because it is very necessary to have a community support. Because let's say you choose a particular Linux distribution that is new in the market and there is not a lot of community support. In that sense, you will not be able to have solutions to your problem. So make sure you choose a well-renowned Linux distribution. Now I'll talk about the software center. Cause there are some Linux distributions that offer different kind of applications to download from their software centers. This is the Ubuntu one. From here you can download and install a lot of applications for free. And it all depends on the repository and the package management, that what type of repositories and package manager a particular Linux distribution supports. Well, Ubuntu supports apt package manager. Let me search for software. So here we have software, which is Ubuntu software. From here you download different application. Then we have software update and then we have software updater. So if I just click on this one, so from here you can include different repositories and these repositories will allow you to download different applications. And you should make sure that the Linux distribution that you are going to use have a lot of applications available to be downloaded and installed for free. So that was all about the software center and the package manager. And that brings us to the end of today's video. So I hope now you know that what consideration you should make while choosing a particular Linux distribution as you are a beginner. So the factors that I have mentioned and I have talked about in this video are the primary one. So you should consider all of these and I'm sure that you will be able to choose a particular Linux distribution. And I hope now that you must have liked this video. If that is the case, please leave a like, subscribe and press the bell icon. I'll get back to you in the next video. Till then, take care.